Christmas morning. The house smelled of cinnamon, roasted turkey, and the faint pine of the tree I decorated 2 weeks early. I'd been up since 6, wearing my red sweater, the one Robert used to say made me look festive, and arranging the last touches on the dining table. Crystal glasses, white china, gold-rimmed napkins, everything perfect, just the way my family liked it. Or at least, the way I hoped they did. It was supposed to be a morning filled with laughter and warmth. My son Derek, his wife Jessica, and my grandchildren Emma and Jake were coming. Every year I tried to make Christmas feel magical, as if Robert were still here. For 15 years since he passed, I'd done everything I could to keep our traditions alive. I thought if I worked hard enough, cooked enough, loved enough, maybe they'd still see this house as home. When Derek's car pulled into the driveway, my heart lifted the way it always did. I wiped my hands on my apron and rushed to the door. Emma and Jake ran in first, giggling, carrying the scent of winter and excitement. They hugged me, shouting, "Grandma, look what Santa brought." And just like that, all the hours of work felt worth it. Then Jessica stepped inside, elegant as always, in her cream sweater and pearl earrings. She smiled tightly. "Merry Christmas, Catherine. You've really outdone yourself." It sounded more like an observation than a compliment. Derek followed, phone in hand, scrolling through messages. "Smells good, Mom," he said without looking up. I swallowed the ache of disappointment. "Thank you, sweetheart. Dinner will be ready soon." As they settled in, I busied myself in the kitchen, arranging dishes that had taken me 3 days to prepare. Glazed ham, herb-stuffed turkey, sweet potato casserole, 3 pies. I wanted everything to be perfect, maybe too perfect. Jessica often said I overdid things. "You don't need to make so much, Catherine. We're only 4 people." But for me, abundance was love made visible. We sat down to dinner around 2. The kids were restless, Derek half distracted, Jessica picking at her food. I kept glancing at them, hoping to see gratitude, or even just contentment. Instead, the only sound was the soft clink of silverware. Then I heard Jessica whisper to Derek, "We should tell her now." My stomach tightened. "Tell me what?" When dessert came out, pumpkin pie, Derek's favorite, he finally cleared his throat. "Mom, we wanted to tell you about our spring break plans. We've already booked a beach resort in Mexico." I smiled politely. "That sounds lovely. The kids must be so excited." "They are," Jessica said quickly. "It'll be good for us, just some family time." "Of course," I said. "When do you leave?" "April 15th, Derek answered, eyes still on his plate. I waited. I waited for the words that should have come next. "You should come with us, Mom." But they never did. The silence grew heavier with every second. I forced a smile, cutting another bite of pie I couldn't taste. "That sounds wonderful," I said softly. "You'll have a great time." Later, when they were in the living room, I started clearing the table. The clatter of plates filled the silence that followed me everywhere. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but their voices carried through the walls. "She's going to be hurt," Derek said. Jessica sighed. "She'll be fine. We need this. It's just for our family. Just for our family." I stood there, frozen. The phrase echoed in my chest like a blow. If they were family, then what was I? When I brought the kids dessert, Emma looked up at me and asked the question that shattered the fragile peace I'd been clinging to. "Grandma, aren't you coming with us to Mexico?" The room went dead silent. Jessica's face went pale. Derek stopped mid-sentence. Even little Jake looked up from his toy. Jessica spoke first, her voice sharp. "Emma, Grandma isn't coming with us. It's just for our family," Emma frowned. "But Grandma is family." That was when Derek said it. The words I would hear in my sleep for weeks. Grandma isn't part of our family in that way. This trip is just for our immediate family. I felt my face go still, my breath caught somewhere between shock and heartbreak. But I smiled anyway. I always smiled. "Of course, sweetheart," I said softly. "You all have a wonderful time." They left soon after, hugs and quick goodbyes, the air filled with unspoken tension. When the door closed behind them, the house fell silent. The kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, it fills you. I walked into the living room. The tree glowed softly, the ornaments reflecting little flecks of light across the walls. The stockings I'd hung for each of them, still there, untouched. The plates, the gifts, the feast, all meaningless now. I sank into Robert's old chair and stared at the faint reflection of myself in the window. My red sweater, the smile still frozen on my face, the tears refusing to fall. In that moment, I realized something I should have seen years ago. I wasn't their family, not in the way I thought. I was the background, the person who kept the lights on, the food warm, the traditions alive, while they lived their own lives without me. And that Christmas morning, something inside me quietly broke. Not in anger, in understanding. They had moved on, and maybe it was time I did too. The days after Christmas felt strange, quiet, but not peaceful. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when everything looks the same but nothing feels familiar. I went through my routines like a ghost, watering plants, folding laundry, making tea I didn't drink. Every corner of the house echoed with memories that suddenly felt misplaced. It wasn't just the words Derek said that haunted me, it was how ordinary they sounded. Grandma isn't part of our family in that way. He didn't say it in anger. He said it like a fact, and somehow that made it worse. One night, I sat at my dining table, the same one I'd set for Christmas dinner, and stared at the place where Derek had sat. His phone had been right next to his plate, lighting up every few minutes. I wondered if he remembered the same table when he was 5, how he'd sit on Robert's lap and ask for extra gravy for Daddy's helper. Back then, the table meant family. Now it was just wood and silence. On New Year's Eve, fireworks popped faintly in the distance. I sat alone with a glass of wine and a stack of papers spread out across the table. Mortgage bills, tax receipts, bank statements. I'd been meaning to organize them for months, but that night I wasn't sorting finances. I was searching for something else, proof that all those years had meant something. As I added up numbers, a different kind of truth began to take shape. 15 years of helping Derek and Jessica. 15 years of believing I was supporting my family. The total stunned me, $127,000. That's how much I'd given them, outright or through loans that were never repaid. The down payment for their first house, the honeymoon they couldn't quite afford, the second mortgage I took out when Derek's startup failed, the car repairs, the daycare bills, the small temporary helps that added up to my life savings. I sat back in my chair, staring at the total. $127,000. My hands trembled. I'd been so busy being generous that I hadn't noticed I was being drained. When my husband died, the first days of January passed quietly. I stopped checking my phone every hour, stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. The silence from Derek's side was both strange and liberating. For years, I'd been the one to fix things after every fight, the first to call, to soften, to forgive. But this time I didn't. The house felt different now. The same walls, the same furniture, but it no longer felt like a home, just a shell full of echoes. I noticed how many things I owned for their sake. 4 bedrooms, but only 1 ever used. A dining table big enough for 8, though I ate alone. A fridge always stocked with the kids' favorite snacks, even though they rarely visited. One afternoon, I stood in the hallway, surrounded by framed family photos. Derek as a boy, grinning at his first baseball trophy. Our family trip to Yosemite, Robert lifting Emma on his shoulders. Pictures of holidays, birthdays, moments that once meant joy. I looked at them and realized they didn't tell the truth anymore. They told a story I was no longer part of. That night, I walked through the house, turning off the lights one by one. When I reached the kitchen, I stopped and whispered out loud, "What am I still doing here?" The question startled me. It was the first time I'd allowed myself to ask it. The next morning, I called Patricia Patterson, my old real estate agent. She'd sold us this house 15 years ago. "Patricia," I said, my voice steady but soft. "I'm thinking about selling." She sounded surprised. "Selling? Catherine, are you sure? You love that house." "I did," I said. "But I think it's time to move on." Within hours, Patricia came by with her tablet. She walked through every room, noting the sunlight, the polished floors, the kitchen I'd renovated 3 years ago. She smiled as she worked. "Catherine, this house is beautiful. You've taken such good care of it." I nodded, though the compliment didn't feel like pride anymore. It felt like goodbye. When she finished her walkthrough, she turned her screen toward me. Given the current market, I'd estimate between $680,000 and $720,000. I blinked. That much? It's a seller's market right now. You could list it tomorrow and have multiple offers by the weekend. I sat down, the weight of her words sinking in. $700,000. More money than I'd ever had at once. Enough to do anything I wanted. Enough to start completely over. Patricia smiled. Are you thinking of downsizing? Maybe a condo or something closer to the coast? I don't know yet, I said honestly. But I want something smaller. Something that's just mine. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table with the printout of her estimate. The numbers blurred as tears filled my eyes. Not sadness exactly, but the strange grief that comes with realizing you've outgrown your own life. That evening, Derek called. I almost didn't pick up, but some part of me, the mother part, still couldn't resist. Mom, he said, his tone cautious. Jessica and I have been talking. Maybe we overreacted at Christmas. I said nothing. He continued. We feel bad about what happened. So, we'd like to invite you to Mexico with us. I almost laughed. A week ago, that invitation would have made me cry with relief. Now it just sounded like a peace offering made of guilt. That's very kind, I said evenly. But I can't. What do you mean you can't? I have plans. What plans? He asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. I'm selling the house. Silence. The kind that stretches long enough to reveal everything someone won't say. You're what? He said finally. Mom, that's crazy. Why would you sell the house? Because it's too big for me, I said. I don't need 4 bedrooms. But where will you go? What about us? The kids? What about you, Derek? You made it clear I'm not part of your family. That's not fair. No, I said quietly. It's honest. He sighed, the way people do when they realize they can't win. We need you here. There it was. The real reason behind his panic. Not love. Not loss. Need. You'll be fine, I said. You have your family. I'll have my life, he raised his voice. Mom, this isn't just about you. What if something happens? What if we need help? Then you'll figure it out. You always do, with or without my money. Mom, please, I've made up my mind. He hung up on me. The next morning, I called Patricia back. Let's list it, I said. As soon as possible. She sounded delighted. Perfect. I can have the listing live by Sunday. True to her word, the house sold within 18 hours. 3 offers, all above asking. I took the cash offer, $735,000. When Patricia called with the news, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Not joy, not excitement, but relief. While Derek and Jessica were posting vacation photos from Mexico, smiling, tanned, happy, I was signing the papers that severed my last tie to them. When I put the pen down, I whispered to myself, 15 years late, but right on time. For once, the future felt wide open. I didn't know where I'd go, but I knew one thing for certain. Wherever it was, it would finally belong to me. The house closed on February 15th. I had 30 days to pack up 15 years of my life. I thought it would be hard, that I'd cry as I folded the memories into boxes. But instead, I felt strangely calm. Every drawer I emptied, every picture I wrapped made me feel lighter. The last box I sealed was labeled Christmas decorations. I ran my hand across the word and smiled. Next Christmas, I decided, there would be no oversized turkey, no feast for people who didn't want to be there. Maybe I'd decorate a tiny tree, just for me. When moving day came, I stood in the doorway one final time. The rooms echoed, bare and bright. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and fresh paint. For years, this house had been my anchor, the proof that I'd built a life worth living after Robert died. But now it felt like a cage. Goodbye, I whispered, and closed the door behind me. 3 days later, I arrived in Half Moon Bay, a small coastal town with rolling hills, misty mornings, and a sound I hadn't heard in years, the steady hush of the ocean. My new home was a little white cottage perched on a quiet street overlooking the water. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and a garden waiting to be brought back to life. It was perfect. For the first time in decades, everything I owned fit into a few boxes. No heavy furniture, no clutter of obligation, just me and what mattered. The first night I fell asleep to the sound of waves. I'd forgotten what real peace sounded like. Not the absence of noise, but the kind of quiet that hums with possibility. The next morning, sunlight poured through the curtains, soft and golden. I made coffee, sat by the window, and watched the fog lift off the ocean. I should have felt lonely, but I didn't. I felt free. I spent the next few days unpacking slowly. No rush, no schedule. I hung my pictures where I wanted them. The walls looked bare but honest. Every choice I made, from where to put the dishes to how to arrange the furniture, was for me. Not for visitors I was trying to impress. For years, I had cooked, cleaned, and lived for other people's comfort. Now I was learning to build comfort of my own. By the end of the week, the cottage finally felt like home. I planted daisies by the front steps and tomatoes in the back garden. I set up one bedroom as a small art studio, even though I hadn't painted in decades. Something about the ocean light called to me, the way it changed from blue to silver to gold as the day passed. One afternoon, while struggling with a heavy bag of potting soil at the local nursery, a woman appeared beside me. She looked to be around my age, with kind eyes and weathered hands. "Need a hand with that?" she asked. I smiled. "Please, I think I overestimated my strength." She laughed and helped me lift the bag into my car. "I'm Carol," she said. "I don't think I've seen you around here before." "I just moved in," I replied. "Catherine Brooks." "Well, welcome to Half Moon Bay. Are you retired?" "Yes, recently." "Then you'll love it here," she said. "There's a book club that meets every Wednesday at the library, mostly women our age. You should come. We're reading The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo next." I hadn't been part of a group since my teaching days. For years, my Wednesdays had belonged to Derek, babysitting, helping with errands, whatever he needed. I almost said no out of habit, but instead I heard myself say, "I'd love to." Carol grinned. "See you Wednesday then." As I drove home, I realized I was smiling, not the polite smile I used to wear at family gatherings, but a real one. That evening, the phone rang. Derek. I let it go to voicemail. The next morning, curiosity got the better of me, and I listened. "Mom," his voice said, light but strained. "Jessica's pregnant. We just found out. We're going to need some help for a while, with the house and everything. Call me when you can." I sat in silence, staring out the window at the ocean. Old instincts stirred, the reflex to fix, to support, to rush in. But then I remembered Christmas morning. The words, the look in his eyes when he said I wasn't part of their family. I picked up the phone, dialed his number, and waited for him to answer. "Mom," he said, relief flooding his voice. "I was just saying, congratulations," I said. "Thanks. We're thrilled. It's just, Jessica might have to stop working for a while, and we're already stretched thin, so you'll figure it out," I said, gently but firmly. "Mom, wait. You don't understand. We're not asking for much. Just some help until—" "Derek," I said, "you have a family now. You'll find a way." And before he could protest, I ended the call. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't even feel angry. I just felt done. The next few weeks passed quietly. I joined Carol's book club and met women who laughed loudly and spoke freely. Susan, a retired nurse. Linda, who'd run a catering business. Beth, a widow who'd moved here after losing her husband. Each of them had stories, scars, and strength. We talked about books, life, and love. No one asked me for money. No one expected me to fix their problems. I wasn't anyone's backup plan. I was simply Catherine. Every Wednesday night, I came home from those meetings feeling lighter. I'd forgotten how good it felt to belong without strings. One evening, I stood on my porch, looking at the ocean, and realized something quietly beautiful. I didn't miss my old life. I missed who I used to be in it, the woman who believed love was earned through sacrifice. But that woman was gone, this new version of me, the one who painted, laughed, read, and slept soundly, was learning that peace could exist without permission. And for the first time in 15 years, I wasn't waiting for anyone to call. I was exactly where I was meant to be. A month after I settled into my new life, peace had started to feel normal, not fragile, not borrowed, just mine. But peace, I've learned, has a way of being tested. It was a Saturday morning when I saw an unfamiliar car pull into my driveway. I wasn't expecting anyone. When the door opened, my heart sank. Derek stepped out. For a moment, I thought I was seeing things. He looked older, tired, the confident ease he once carried replaced by something raw and desperate. "Mom," he called, walking toward me. I stood by the garden gate, soil still on my gloves. "Derek," I said, my voice even. "How did you find me?" He hesitated, eyes darting away. "I hired someone. A private investigator. Of course he did." I should have been surprised, but I wasn't. That was Derek's way. When something was hard, he found a shortcut, even if it cost him. "What do you need?" I asked. I want to talk." He looked around the little cottage like he couldn't believe it. "You really moved here? You sold the house. Just like that." "Just like that," I said softly. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Jessica's not doing well," he said finally. "We're behind on the mortgage. The bank's threatening foreclosure. If we could just get caught up." I waited. He took a breath. "We need $45,000. Just to get current." The number hung in the air like a bad joke. $45,000, I repeated slowly. "Yes, that would fix everything." I looked at him. Really looked at him. The son I once held through sleepless nights, whose scraped knees I'd kissed, whose dreams I'd funded long after he should have learned to stand on his own. And yet, even now, he stood before me not as a man, but as someone waiting for his mother to fix everything again. I let out a small laugh. Not cruel, just sad. "You hired a private investigator to find me, so you could ask for $45,000. He flinched. "Mom, please. You don't understand how bad it is." "I understand perfectly," I said. "You've been bad for 15 years, Derek. Every problem you've ever had, I've been the solution. And every time I solved one, you found another." His eyes hardened. "We're family, Mom. Families help each other. Families also respect each other," I said quietly. "And you stopped doing that a long time ago." He looked down, jaw tight. "I don't recognize you anymore," he muttered. I smiled faintly. "Good, because the woman you recognize spent 15 years being used." His face flushed. "You're being cruel." "No," I said, my voice calm. "I'm being honest." He sat down on the front step, head in his hands. "We're going to lose everything, then start over," I said simply. "The way I did." "You make it sound easy." "It's not," I said. "But it's possible," he didn't respond. The only sound was the ocean in the distance, waves breaking against the cliffs. Finally, he stood up, his shoulders slumped. "This isn't over, Mom," he said, voice shaking with anger he didn't know how to aim. "Yes, Derek," I said softly. "It is." He stared at me for a long time before turning and walking back to the car. When the engine faded down the road, I exhaled, long and deep, and felt something shift inside me. It was over. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing his voice. "We're family. Families help each other." He was right in a way. Families do help each other, but they don't use each other. They don't measure love by dollar signs. The next morning, I called my lawyer. "I need to update my will," I said. 2 days later, I sat in a small office overlooking Main Street, signing the papers that would ensure my final goodbye to the life I'd left behind. Everything. The savings from the house sale, my pension, even the little cottage, would go into a trust for Emma and Jake. They wouldn't get access until they turned 30, when hopefully they'd be old enough to understand that love isn't money, and family isn't obligation. Derek would get nothing. When I left the lawyer's office, I walked to the beach. The sky was gray and the air smelled of salt and rain. I stood at the water's edge, watching the tide pull back and return, over and over. It felt like a rhythm I finally understood, the rhythm of letting go. I thought about all the years I'd tried to hold everything together, the years I'd mistaken enabling for love, silence for peace. And I realized that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step away. That night, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea and a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The cottage glowed softly behind me, warm and small and mine. I imagined Derek coming home to his house, finding another overdue notice, another consequence of choices he refused to face. Maybe one day he'd learn, maybe he wouldn't. But it wasn't my lesson to teach anymore. For the first time in my adult life, I felt something deeper than happiness. I felt closure. I walked inside and opened my journal to a new page. My handwriting was steadier this time. I have done enough, given enough, been enough, and now I will simply be. The waves outside my window kept their quiet rhythm, as if the ocean itself was whispering agreement. For 15 years, I'd been drowning in my own kindness. That night, I finally came up. 6 months passed. 6 months of ocean mornings, book club nights, and the quiet satisfaction of planting something that grew only because I wanted it to. The garden flourished. Tomatoes, lavender and rosemary spilling over the fence. My art studio was full of half-finished paintings, each one a reflection of the piece I was learning to live with. I painted the sea most days, not for beauty, but for understanding. The ocean, I realized, was a lot like me. Constant motion above, deep calm beneath. I'd settled into a rhythm. Coffee at sunrise, a walk along the cliffs, lunch with Carol or the book club girls. Evenings spent reading, painting, or simply watching the horizon fade into gold. Life had finally found its balance. Until one afternoon in July when the doorbell rang, I wasn't expecting anyone. Carol always called first. The mailman never came this late. When I opened the door, the sight before me froze me in place. Jessica, and behind her, Emma and Jake. Jessica looked different, thinner, paler, her polished veneer replaced by something raw and uncertain. The children stood close to her, clutching small backpacks. "Catherine," she said softly, "may we come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. "Of course." They entered quietly, as if afraid to disturb the peace. Emma looked around the small cottage, her eyes wide. "It's so cozy, Grandma," she said. "And it smells like flowers," I smiled. "Thank you, sweetheart." Jessica stood near the window, her gaze fixed on the ocean. For a long time, she didn't speak. Finally, she turned toward me. "I owe you an apology," she said. I stayed silent. "I was jealous," she admitted, "of how close you and Derek were, of how much you gave him and how much he relied on you. I thought, if I could create distance between you, maybe he'd need me more. But I only made things worse." Her voice trembled, but she didn't cry. "I ruined what made our family strong," she continued. "And I let Derek believe it was okay to use you. He's lost now, Catherine, truly lost. He blames you for everything, but I know the truth. We did this." I studied her face, tired, honest, stripped of pride. For the first time, I saw not the woman who took my son, but the woman who was also trapped by him. "Thank you for saying that," I said finally. Jessica took a deep breath. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, and to ask one thing." I waited. "Could the kids visit you sometimes?" "They miss you." I turned to Emma and Jake. Their eyes were wide, hopeful, uncertain. Emma held a drawing, 3 figures on a beach. "It's us," she said. "Me, Jake, and you." My heart softened in a way I hadn't expected. I looked back at Jessica. "I can't go back to the way things were," I said gently. "But the kids can visit, once a month. No money, no guilt. Just family," Jessica nodded. "That's fair." That afternoon, I took the kids to the beach. The air was warm, the sky soft with summer haze. We built sandcastles near the shore, the waves washing gently around our feet. "Grandma," Jake said, "Dad said you moved far away because you were mad." I smiled. "No, sweetheart. I moved because I wanted to live near the ocean. It makes me happy." He seemed to think about that for a while. "Do you miss us?" "Every day," I said truthfully. "But sometimes missing people means you still love them, even from far away." Emma looked up at me, her hair tangled in the wind. "Will you teach me to paint next time?" "I'd love to," I said. For 2 hours, time felt suspended, the laughter of children mixing with the sound of the sea. There were no harsh words, no tension, no past to navigate, just the simple joy of being together. When the sun dipped low, Jessica called from the car. "Time to go." The kids hugged me tightly. Emma whispered, "I'm glad you're happy now." "I am too," I said. After they left, I walked along the shoreline until twilight. The sky had turned violet, the tide retreating quietly. I thought about what Jessica had said, about jealousy, mistakes, and forgiveness. Forgiveness, I realized, didn't mean erasing the past. It meant refusing to live inside it. That night, I sat on the porch, the ocean breeze brushing against my skin. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't even feel sad. Just still, like the world had exhaled and so had I. Maybe Jessica's visit was never about reconciliation. Maybe it was a reminder that healing wasn't just mine. It belonged to everyone willing to face their truth. I poured myself a glass of wine and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Derek was still struggling, still blaming, still searching for something outside himself to fix what was broken within. I couldn't save him anymore, but maybe someday he'd save himself. And when that day came, I hoped he'd find peace too. Until then, I would keep living. I'd keep painting, gardening, laughing with Carol, reading with my book club. I'd keep being the woman I'd fought to become. When I finally went to bed that night, I left the window open. The sound of waves filled the room, steady, eternal, forgiving. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't dream of the past. I dreamed of tomorrow. By autumn, the rhythm of my new life had settled into something both gentle and sure. The mornings were cooler now, the fog rolling in from the ocean like a soft gray blanket. I'd wrap a shawl around my shoulders, sip coffee on the porch, and listen to the world wake up. Half Moon Bay had become more than a new address. It had become home. The garden bloomed beyond anything I'd imagined. The tomatoes were ripe and sweet. The lavender drew bees that hummed lazily in the afternoon sun. I spent hours painting the way the light touched the petals, the way the sea mirrored the sky. Each brushstroke felt like breathing, a language I hadn't spoken since Robert died. Every week, my circle of friends grew a little larger. Carol still ran the book club, but now we met at different houses, taking turns hosting dinners that ended with laughter and late-night confessions. There was Susan, who told stories about her patients with the same warmth she gave to everyone she met. Linda, who brought desserts that always came with stories of chaos in her catering days. And Beth, whose humor could make anyone forget their worries. I used to think friendship was something you stumbled into when you were young, that after a certain age, it was too late to build new bonds. But I was wrong. The women I met here didn't know the old Catherine, the one who existed only for her family, who mistook exhaustion for devotion. They knew this Catherine, steady, strong, and finally free, and they loved her. I didn't realize how much that mattered until one evening when Carol said, "You've changed, you know. When I first met you, you were polite, nice, but now you laugh from your stomach. You smile with your eyes." It's good to see. Her words stayed with me. I smiled because she was right. I had changed, not into someone new, but back into the person I'd always been, beneath the weight of sacrifice. In October, Emma and Jake came for their third visit. They tumbled out of Jessica's car, carrying art supplies and sand buckets. "Grandma, we brought our paintings," Emma announced proudly. She showed me a watercolor of the sea, shaky lines, uneven colors, but full of heart. "You taught me," she said. "I showed you," I replied, smiling. "But you painted it yourself." Jessica joined us on the porch. She looked healthier now, more at ease. The guilt that once shadowed her eyes had softened into something like respect. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for letting them come. It means more than you know." "They're good kids," I said. "They deserve to know where they come from, and that love doesn't have conditions." Jessica nodded. "I'm trying to teach them that." We spent the afternoon at the beach, the children running in and out of the waves. I painted as they played, Emma chasing the tide, Jake building a fortress of wet sand. Jessica sat beside me, silent for a long time. Finally, she said, "He still won't talk to you, you know." "I know," I said. "He's angry. At you, at himself, at life." "I stopped expecting apologies," I said. "Peace doesn't need them." Jessica exhaled, nodding slowly. "I hope one day he understands." So do I. As the sun began to set, I looked at the scene before me. The ocean, the laughter, the warm gold light. For so long, I'd chased the idea of family as something to preserve, something fragile that could break if I didn't hold it tightly enough. But here, in this moment, I saw it for what it truly was. Not something you hold, but something that holds you. Family wasn't blood. Family was peace. That evening, after Jessica and the kids left, I walked through the cottage, turning off the lights one by one. In my studio, I paused by a canvas, a nearly finished painting of the ocean at dawn. I picked up the brush and added a final stroke of white where the sun met the water. Then I smiled. I'd been painting this view for months, but I hadn't realized until that moment what I'd really been painting. Not the sea, not the sky, but the feeling of finally coming home to myself. A week later, I updated my will one last time. It wasn't about money or possessions anymore. It was about meaning. Emma and Jake would inherit what was left, not as a reward, but as a lesson. I wrote them a letter to go with it. My dear Emma and Jake, I want you to remember this. Love should never cost you your peace. Family is not who takes from you, but who stands beside you when you have nothing left to give. Be kind, be strong. And when the world tries to tell you that love must hurt to be real, walk away and find a quieter kind of love, the kind that feels like coming home. I sealed the letter and felt a deep, unshakable calm. The following Sunday, Carol and the others came over for dinner. We ate outside under string lights, the sound of the waves humming below. We laughed about everything and nothing, our lives tangled together by shared stories and simple joys. At one point, as I cleared the table, Carol looked at me and said, "You know, Catherine, I think you finally found your family." I glanced around, at Carol, at Linda and Susan and Beth, at the sea glowing silver beneath the moonlight, and I nodded. "Yes," I said softly, "I think I have." Later that night, after everyone left, I sat on the porch again. The garden swayed gently in the breeze. The stars shimmered above, the ocean whispered below. I closed my eyes and thought of Robert, of his steady hands, his quiet strength, his faith in me. I like to think he would have smiled at the woman I'd become. When I opened my eyes, I whispered into the night, "Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shares your peace." And with that, I leaned back, listening to the rhythm of the waves, endless, forgiving, alive. For the first time in 15 years, I didn't feel forgotten or abandoned. I felt free. I felt whole. I felt home. Let us know in the comment, where are you watching from? Please subscribe to the channel, Her Side of the Story. Thanks for watching until here.